allegedly broke up my marriage. You're an awful person.
You're 24 years old. Why would I listen to you? Why would you be giving therapy and advice to people who clearly need it? It doesn't make any sense, Ari. This is a horrible idea.
You're listening to
Unlicensed Therapy with Ari Mannis.
The closer I am with people, the less interesting the conversation is sometimes. You think it'd be more interesting, but like we already know everything about each other and we've talked about everything to certain friends. How do you find when you're interviewing people? Do you prefer them to be a close friend already? Or do you prefer to be someone that you just find really interesting and you want to get to know?
It's just funny, like no matter who it is, I just run out of steam at a certain point, and I'm like, I just want to like not be so focused anymore. You know, like my cognitive bandwidth is just only so.
Is there any secret health product that you take before you interview someone to make your cognitive bandwidth better? Just coffee?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of coffee. I find that if you drink too much, it's called like a U-shaped curve where a little bit is better than none, but too much could be detrimental as well. So it's like finding that sweet spot.
Too much, people are going to think you're on cocaine.
Exactly.
What about, do you find that same thing with cocaine? If you take a little bit of cocaine before a podcast?
That's a good question. I should try it. I've never tried it. I've never actually tried cocaine.
I feel like none of the health experts are talking about the benefits of cocaine.
There probably are some.
There's got to be some, right?
Yeah, there are probably some. I mean, you know, there's obviously a huge risk also associated with.
You'd have to get it pure on the dark web. You can't be getting street cocaine. You have to get 90% pure cocoa.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any experience with that. I'm interested in drugs. I'm interested in like, you know, MDMA and psilocybin mushrooms and things like that.
I'd be interested. I bring up cocaine, so now it sounds like I do cocaine a lot of drugs. I've done cocaine 3 times in my life. But
you prefer crack.
I prefer crystal meth and heroin. I prefer to shoot up. I like needles. Most people don't. I like them. But it'd be interesting to hear that perspective on drugs from, like, I don't even know what to call you, a health nut, a nutritionist? What's your title?
Yeah, somewhere in between.
Health expert?
Yeah, I call myself a health and science journalist, which is essentially what I am. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not just a journalist. I don't care about politics or entertainment journalism or anything like that.
I get a hint of politics in your content, though.
Lately?
Like, I don't think you would outwardly even say, you've never said to me, I'm a Republican or a Democrat or who you're voting for, and I have a feeling if I asked you, you'd be like, I don't want to talk about that. But I get a hint of what I think you are.
Well, we can talk about it. Yeah. I do feel politically homeless. I don't consider myself a Republican. I don't consider myself a Democrat. I used to certainly be a lot more liberal. I will say that. And I've become more moderate, more centrist over time, especially over the past year, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. There's a picture of you on your social media with Dave Rubin. There it is. That's it.
I really respect Dave Rubin.
So smart.
Yeah, he's so smart. I love him. He's a great guy. And he is a guy who, I met Dave Rubin when he was at the Young Turks. And were you on the Young Turks too, or what was the thing that you were on? I would guest on the Young Turks. They used to have a bunch of panel shows that I would guest on. And the reason why I had even had that relationship with the Young Turks is because the Young Turks was on Current TV towards the end of Current TV. Current TV, for those who don't know, it's a TV network that used to exist in the U.S. that Al Gore co-founded.
Wow!
And I used to work for Current, and I was one of the main on-camera, faces of the network. And, I would...
How did that come about to start with? Was it kind of Hollywood where you auditioned and you got it? Or was it...
No. So I was an undergraduate at University of Miami, double majoring in film and psychology. And I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated school. I was always very much interested in nutrition and fitness and health. And so I started college pre-med, but I ended up pivoting because I realized that I just, that I kind of saw...
Were your intentions, when you were in college, were you thinking, I'm going to be a doctor?
I mean, I did want to be a doctor, yeah, and not because the profession was all that attractive to me necessarily. It was more that I've always been fascinated by like the body and nutrition and supplementation and things like that. So I think for a little while I was like, sports medicine sounds cool, just because it kind of bridged fitness, which is what I was interested in, with more, sort of more deeper sciencey stuff. But really, I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't have like a specialty in mind. I just knew that I was interested
that subject interested you, so I'll study that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where sort of the reality of like looking back at my academic career kind of, I realized that I was never an A student. Like, I was actually, I worked very hard to be a B student. Very hard.
Me too.
Yeah.
I worked very hard to be a C student.
Yeah, I mean,
scrape by.
Yeah. It was difficult.
Maybe I didn't work that hard, but I just hated school. I was never interested in it.
Yeah. I was interested in like what I was interested in. And I was
certain
like
subjects.
deeply, like obsessively interested in what I was interested in. But
so is that why you ended up saying, I'm not going to be a doctor, because you realized, that's a lot of school, and it's going to be really hard for me to do that?
Yeah, and it's not to say that I wasn't passionate about it or that I, in retrospect wouldn't have been able to do it or anything like that. I just kind of realized that, my happiness it wasn't negotiable for me, like even at that age. And I wanted to explore other sides of myself. Like I realized.
You were ready to give up 10 years of your life to.
Definitely not. Yeah. I knew that that's what you had to do. I saw that was the writing in the sand if I wanted to go that route. But I also, halfway through college, realized something about myself that I hadn't previously realized, that I had artistic sensibilities, that I was creative, that I was social, like I was in high school, I was kind of a nerd. And in college, I went to school in Miami, and Miami's a great place to live, and especially when you're like flourishing as a young adult.
A lot of babes there, a lot of hot babes.
Yeah, and I just didn't want to like forsake that and go the hardcore academic route. And there have been times over my life, over the past decade, where I, especially prior to what it is that I'm now doing, having become somewhat successful, where I, kind of thought about like that decision. But in retrospect, I'm happy that I pivoted. Everything makes perfect sense.
To me, based off what you were saying, I don't know what kind of doctor I would be, but I was interested in sports medicine. You're kind of doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much money you make, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say you probably make more money than the average doctor now anyway, so you kind of you got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, well, I'm not in debt.
Yeah, you don't owe $1 million for student loans.
Yeah.
For medical school.
Yeah,
my dad's a doctor. He liked it. He's retired now. He went to medical school in Mexico because he said it was just so competitive to get into American medical schools, even back when he was doing it.
Yeah.
So he went to medical school in Guadalajara, Mexico, and then did his residency in Ohio, and then worked at an American hospital. So maybe if you're going into a hospital right now, you might even be getting a Mexican trained doctor. So
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I started to hear things like, just based on my academic record, that I would have to go to school in the Caribbean or something if I wanted to go to medical school. And I just I think that's kind of sad, because there are a lot of people out there, creatives, artists, who would make amazing doctors if only given the chance, if only like they had different styles of med school that were catered to different learning styles. We all learn differently. And education in general is not set up to cater to those individual differences.
Right.
And that's like a much larger problem that I'm not prepared to like unravel or anything
I think people are realizing that though now. I think people are realizing that the education system is pretty messed up. That these days you could learn almost everything on YouTube, which kind of goes to show you where our education system is at, like coders, all these new jobs that are coming in, you don't learn in our traditional school system. So it's kind of changing, but I don't know how it's going to change or where it'll be in 10 years from now.
Yeah, I definitely struggled. I mean, I was always in the honors program, in the gifted program, when
Doesn't sound struggle to me.
I mean, it was, yeah, well, I mean, I struggled to get good grades, and I didn't get good grades. I got like very mediocre grades, and the grades that I got, I worked, it was like the classes that I was, the pattern, like if you look at my grade cards or whatever they were called, the classes where I was like really passionate and I had a really good teacher, I would get, A's. But then there were classes that were sometimes easier than those classes, but I just wasn't interested.
Right.
And I would get D's. And that would or I would fail them. And that would bring my entire average just like way down. So it was a very uneven report card.
Yeah, they had to make it interesting for you to want to do it.
Yeah. Or I had to be personally invested. That's kind of how my brain works. It's like a light switch. It's very binary. Like I'm either, completely obsessed with a topic, or I'm not interested at all. It's why I don't know anything about sports at all. I'm not casual about anything in my life. You know.
I would say the same for me too.
Love that.
100% or 0. That's the way I do it.
100% or 0.
So how did you go from college to the Young Turks?
So when so as an undergraduate, because I was double majoring in film and psychology, I had gravitated to documentary filmmaking, which when I went to college, so I graduated 2005, and this was like just at the beginning of, I think, like Friendster was the social
media. I remember Friendster.
Yeah.
I had a profile, but I never really used it because I was a little too young for it. I just made it because I was into computers.
Yeah. Was it? I guess, yeah. So Friendster was maybe
before
that was
MySpace,
even
right?
Yeah, it was before MySpace. Maybe I don't even think Friendster was around, honestly, when I was in school. I don't exactly remember. I don't think social media was like not a thing.
2007, you said? Yeah, 2007 was.
2005 is when I graduated.
Okay, so that was MySpace was out in 2005, I think.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, there was MySpace during that time.
So there was MySpace, but there was no YouTube. And if anybody remembers MySpace, digital video was not really a thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was like low res, you know. So it was at a very interesting time where suddenly, like, digital cameras had gotten cheap enough. Like, I don't know if you remember point and shoot cameras, but they were suddenly able to take really good video on those cameras. And so I gravitated to documentary filmmaking because of the immediacy that technology allowed in terms of storytelling. You know, as a film student, you learn how to set lights up and, you know, do stuff with film, and none of that stuff interested me. It was like too laborious, you know, and I wasn't really interested. Even though I was a big cinemaphile, I wasn't interested in like learning how to like shoot on film or anything like that. And even like narrative film classes.
Right, the barrier to entry of a documentary film
was way lower
because you just need a camera.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So I gravitated to that, and then as an undergraduate, as part of an independent study, I made a film, a little documentary film project about my life in Miami at the time, which in hindsight feels very self-indulgent to, you know, to have made a film about my life in Miami. But
it's what you knew.
Yeah, it's what I knew.
Document what you know.
And I sent it to the executives that I heard about were building this TV network called Current TV, which at the time it had yet to even be named, but I saw this flyer in the comm school at University of Miami, that said that, you know, Al Gore is chairing this new company that's seeking to empower passionate storytellers to take back traditional media. This is before YouTube, again, like, just to remind you. So it's like, this was an incredible, it sounded amazing. Like, oh my God, how are young people gonna...
And Al Gore had a really popular documentary.
He kind of had like a cool factor.
Yeah.
And also like young people gravitate towards like...
They made fun of him on South Park a lot.
They did, yes. And I didn't know anything about politics back then either. You know, I still don't really. So, but nonetheless, I was really interested in media, and I didn't know what the fuck else I was going to do post-graduation. So to me, that sounded like a dream job, and I like wanted it so badly that I applied for the job. So did thousands of other kids like around the U.S.
Yeah, I'm sure that was insanely competitive.
Yeah, it was
to work for Al Gore.
Yeah, it was insanely competitive. But that film that I made, after I had submitted all the requisite application components, I sent that film. I like emailed the inbox or whatever of the company on their website. Like, it was very
separately from the application.
From the application. Yeah, it was very you know, like mysterious. Like there was just like contact at currenttv.com or whatever it was called. I think it was Indie TV. At the time.
And you're just, I might as well try to email it, see what happens.
Yeah, so I sent in this email. I was like, hey, my name is Max Lugavere. You know, I'm an undergraduate at University of Miami. I sent in the application, you know, but I'm making this film that I think really kind of showcases like who I am, my sensibilities, more than everything that I had just, submitted. So can I send it in? Will you like look at it? Yeah. And they said, yeah, send it in. So I sent in this film, and actually, I did it with my best friend at the time at University of Miami. And based on that film, they hired me and my friend to jointly host the network together. So they moved us to LA. They paid to move us out.
You must have been stoked,
right? I was stoked.
You're graduating college and you're like, wow, this Al Gore's network is paying for us to go to LA and be on TV.
Yeah.
You must have been top of the world at that point.
From one day to the next, I was on national TV in a studio working with like Hollywood professionals. And there were other people on the network that were like cast, but I felt like I had won like the lottery because I wasn't cast.
Right.
And I wasn't like...
You just emailed a website, a little video you made, not a little video, I mean a project you made.
Yeah.
that I'm sure you were very proud of.
Yeah.
But still, you made a video, you emailed it in, and now you have a job that people would kill for.
Yeah, I was making the first year I made $30,000.
So this was non-union.
Non-union, yeah, definitely non-union. And I was on TV, like working amongst other like Hollywood types, but I was like not jaded because it's not like I was in Hollywood auditioning and failing for years.
Yeah, you might have someone who's been there 10 years, gets a $30,000 job. You're like, yeah, of course I have a $30,000 job. I've been doing this 10 years, but you're like, this is awesome.
This is awesome. Yeah, I was so psyched. And I was living in this neighborhood, I was living in West Hollywood, on TV, working for Al Gore, and I was like young and hungry and like on salary, and I was still like in the, at night I was still interested in like partying. So I was like going out like in Hollywood, rubbing shoulders with like the young Hollywood crowd at the time, but on TV and with this mission ultimately that I felt was very, like had like social impact at its core. It wasn't just like
the TV network itself.
The TV network itself. Yeah. And it was like something that I identified with because I was never interested in entertainment journalism or politics or anything like that. I somehow got to be a journalist on TV where I got to talk about whatever I wanted. So sometimes it was like the environment, sometimes it would be politics or whatever. And I would learn about that, as I would go. But then I got to talk about health, on occasion, or technology.
Now, you say whatever you wanted. Was it literally, okay, here's what we're talking about today, and you would come in with the subject? Or did the network say, okay, today we're talking about, you have to come up with a piece on health, or you have to come up with a piece on politics?
Well, the network was basically built on these short-form documentaries that they called pods. So it was like it was a unique thing where there were no shows on the network. They had these like music video sized short documentaries.
4-minute documentaries.
4-minute documentaries because they went into it with the mentality that young people have very short attention spans.
True.
Let's like tell a complete story in 4 minutes.
They were the first rendition of Vine.
Pretty much, TikTok. It was super ahead of its time.
Or YouTube,
Yeah, it was super ahead of its time. But that's exactly it. And so I was like kind of a VJ where instead of talking about music videos, I was there in, doing what we call wraps, like doing, intros and outros for each of these short documentaries.
Yeah, so you didn't make the documentaries at this time. You were the host, so you would cut to them.
I was the host, yes. Yeah. But then I did get to make some of them as well. And, I would have to go sort of through like the pitch process. I would have to pitch the idea to my higher ups, but then I would get this amazing team to work with at my disposal. So it allowed me an amazing opportunity to get to shine a light on things that I wanted to bring attention to.
So they knew you obviously because you were the host. Yep. Whereas I imagine were the other people making documentaries, was that their full-time job making documentaries for that show? Or were they just independent filmmakers they do that documentary, then they're on to the next, whatever they're doing?
Independent filmmakers. I mean, the network had a staff, had like, it was a company, and we had on-staff producers and predators, which are like producer editors, it was very like cost-effective way to do it.
Right.
But no, the network basically pioneered citizen journalism. So anybody around the world could submit one of these short form documentaries.
Got it.
And end up on TV. And a lot of these people were independent filmmakers. Not all of them were successful, but basically the network, the whole mantra of the network was we're going to empower citizen storytellers, seizing like capitalizing on the fact that technology is now so cheap and, anybody can now have a laptop that's powerful enough to have editing software on it and whatever. I mean, look, now we have iMovie on our iPhones, right? Like you can literally make a movie on your iPhone. So
Tangerine was shot on the iPhone.
That was such a good film.
Yeah, great film. So when you were pitching these ideas, they knew you. So I imagine it would be awkward if they rejected you. Did you get them? Did you get a bunch of rejections as well for your short form documentaries, or were they like, yeah, go for it?
I didn't get that many rejections. There were definitely like some editorial directions where, there would occasionally be sound bites that I would want to put in that the higher ups would say, no, we got to cut that out. But I actually ended up learning a lot about, how to create good, compelling content over the course of that process. Like, I'll just give you an example. Back when I first started, I thought that, you got to you want to make yourself look cool, right? If you make yourself look cool, the audience is going to think you're cool, right? But actually, that's not the case. If you are self-deprecating and honest and authentic and you fuck up every now and then, you shouldn't like make an effort to make yourself look cool.
Right.
But like
People want to be in on it rather than observing it. They want to feel like they're part of it.
Yeah,
in
like
a sense.
if you're authentic, then you're going to naturally appear cool. But any effort that you make to be cool is going to end up smacking you in the face. You know, and so I learned that like I would like want to put in clips that made me look cool or seem, and these are all the things that you learn when you're
like let's try that. Let's do that same take, but I'm going to take off my shirt.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Just stupid things like that. So there were a lot of those kinds of moments. What you learn is ultimately, and I know you know this as the host of a successful podcast, like ultimately you have to be, you want to be always in the service of the audience. When you have somebody's attention, that's a really great thing. It's a privilege, it's an honor. And so you got to kind of like honor that. Like you've always got to be adding value.
Right.
And if you're just there trying to make yourself look cool, you're going to look like a douche,
100%. So when you would make these little pieces, you were also hosting them. So you would say, and I made a piece today. We're going to go check out a little documentary I made. Did you get pay bonuses for making that short film at all?
Definitely not.
So that was purely out of passion then?
Yeah, purely out of passion. I didn't have a quota or anything like that. I was every day on TV, like doing those raps, those host raps.
Did you have to memorize lines or was there a teleprompter?
Teleprompter.
Got it. So you just came in, we're doing this, and it wasn't live, so you could do as many takes as you needed to get the rap.
Right. It was like live to tape, like you guys, like we tape, podcasts. There's like no editing, but yeah. And I got to write. I got to work with writers. It was really amazing. It was like grad school, but instead of going into debt, for it.
You got a little money.
I got a little bit of money. Yeah.
So how long do you do that for?
I did that for probably 6 years.
And okay, so in that process, that's where you were on a bunch of their other shows, and you met Dave Rubin and other various characters that were.
So about 5 years in, Current realized that. So 5 years in, or sometime within that time frame, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter came about and ultimately eclipsed what the network sought to do. Why were people going to submit content to Current TV, which had X number of viewers, very limited number of viewers, when they could just put it on YouTube and see it go viral,
right,
and achieve fame that way? Nobody was getting famous by being on Current TV. I was on it for 6 years, and I didn't leave it famous at all.
And when YouTube first came out, correct me if I'm wrong, like now, these other sources, like if there was a Current TV now, they would have their own YouTube channel, and they'd be putting their own content on there.
Exactly.
But in the beginning, they were kind of fighting YouTube. And they're like, well, no, we're on TV. We're not going to be on YouTube.
Exactly. It was like sort of competitive, and YouTube ended up kicking Current's butt, But I think sometime there was a brief period where Current was like pivoting, and it tried to go a more traditional model where it would have shows. And so it brought on the Young Turks, which was a very left-leaning YouTube channel, news and information channel that, Current was actually never political. It wasn't a very left-leaning channel, even though Al Gore owned it. And I didn't even know at the time that the Young Turks was left-leaning. When I say that I'm not into politics, like,
yeah, you're not into politics.
I'm really not. Like, I don't.
You're just a guy, so you're gonna know a little bit about it because it's consumed the world right now.
Yeah,
but it's not your thing.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm like, the fact that. Look, Trump was very polarizing, right? But he did get a lot of people interested in politics, for better or worse, that weren't previously interested in politics.
100%.
And so the fact that we can all kind of now speak the same language and have like what hopefully I think can be a meaningful conversation about it, that's one of the silver linings, I think, of all this.
Yeah, or you could say on the downside, now there's a lot of stupid people who have big opinions.
That's a good point, too.
That might be better off just not knowing anything about politics.
That's a good point. Yeah, maybe I'm one of those idiots.
I'm thinking of young Tinder babes for me who put in their bio, if you think this way, swipe left.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, well, just don't say anything.
Dude, you're going to love
the place.
I signed up for Hinge recently, and I put, so on Hinge, one of the prompts is like, it's like, it starts out, you should not go out with me if, ... and you fill in the blank. I put, if you are a virtue signaling social justice warrior.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I thought that was, it's like weeding out all the kinds of people that I don't want to have to interact with,
See, I give you props for putting that filter in because I'll just pretend like I'm okay with that just to meet them. Maybe I'm like, oh, maybe they're great besides that. But no, I should just be pickier.
Just for the lols. I get it. I'm
also, it's cool that you're on Hinge because in my mind, you would never. You're a famous person. Why would you need Hinge? You could probably just date whoever you want. Date movie stars. Gal Gadot, and you probably go out and get coffee all the time. I'm
on Raya. Do you know Raya?
Yeah.
And Raya is the worst. Raya's
yeah,
terrible.
Raya is wannabe models and actresses.
Yeah,
and
it's garbage, and nobody's on there to date. People are on there because it's like apparently a status thing. I don't know, but I signed up and I have a free account, so I just never closed it. But I think the cool thing about Hinge, and I think like online dating. Look, say what you want about it, but right now it's like, especially living in LA. LA is a horrible place for if you're single right now.
Yeah, LA is the worst.
It's just not.
It always feels like I can meet. I don't know if it's something about being on the road, but when I'm on the road, I'm like, it seems easier to meet people anywhere besides LA.
Well, because you're also like a superstar when you're on the road,
yeah,
right? Like
maybe that's what it is.
I mean, at least in my head, like you're touring. You've got groupies and stuff.
I'm like a super clown on the road. I'm a paid clown.
Paid clown.
So you went from the Young Turks, but you weren't on the Young Turks.
I wasn't on.
You made guest appearances on their television version of the Young Turks.
Yeah, and I didn't know. I mean, probably back then I had like more liberal ideals. Although it's not that my thinking has changed; it's that what it means to be liberal has changed.
True,
and that's what Dave Rubin talks about.
Right.
And that's why I love
he would
him
call
so
himself a classic. What's he call himself? A classic liberal or something like that?
Classical liberal, or
I forget the term he uses. But yeah, it's essentially along the lines of it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
It used to be about freedom and and now it's morphed into this.
It's radicalized.
Did you feel the pressure that Current was going to go out of business and you needed to find your next thing as it was going, like the last year you were there, where you're like, I need to find something else. This is going under.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I signed with CAA and they put me up for a bunch of big projects, none of which ultimately panned out. And I went through a period of like complete career, like I felt like my career was in a nosedive and I was in my late 20s, so I was starting to like have like very, I like
anxiety about it.
A lot of anxiety, but like really bad. Like, I was in my late 20s and I was, I started to like think of myself as being basically unemployable because I had been a TV host for all these years, and now like I didn't have any, like
other things on your resume.
Well, things that I mean, I knew how to edit, but I didn't want to be an editor. Like I knew that I didn't want to be an editor. I didn't really want to be a producer. I didn't want to go into politics. I didn't want to go into entertainment journalism. I was interested in health, which is what got me interested in that pre-med track to begin with in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested in music, which was sort of a side, but
Did you make music, or you were just a music fan, or
no? I make music.
Oh, you make music?
Yeah. As a side.
I know I've seen you play guitar,
and
stuff like that. But when you say make music, was it stuff on the guitar, or you? For some reason, when I think the words making music, now I just picture like DJs, and making beats. But when you say you were into music and you make music, is it more acoustic rock, or what kind of?
Yes.
Gotcha.
But I never had the the grit or the constitution to be able to make it in the music industry. No,
man.
And I also hadn't been doing it long enough where I felt like I was really good enough, I
wonder what's more competitive, making it in the music industry or making it in the acting industry. They're both so insanely.
I have friends that are 1,000 times more, that have been doing it way longer than me, that are, I mean, I don't, more talented, just more skilled, whatever, and they're like struggling,
right?
Especially today.
Yeah, buddy of mine went to college. He's been in a band since college, so 12 years now. They're really good, in my opinion, and they all have day jobs.
Yeah,
so
it's
tough.
It's screwed up. I didn't give it like I never thought that it was going to be something that I was going to do full time. Essentially, like when I had the full time job at Current, I would moonlight as a singer-songwriter, and I would play gigs in LA for not just for fun. Like I really got a lot out of it. But I had the cushion of having a salary,
right.
And my day job was a really cool day job that would kind of cross promote the fact that I was also doing music. But once that rug was sort of pulled out from beneath my feet, was it like, I would think to myself, like, am I really going to go for it as a singer-songwriter, or, am I going to find something else that's like really going to like pay my bills, And I didn't know what to do. So there was a period where, like, career-wise, I was, I was
limbo.
in total limbo. And ultimately, the agency that I had signed with dropped me. And
because once you got dropped, once Current TV went under, they weren't getting their 10% of anything.
Well, they weren't getting 10% of my salary at Current TV because I had gotten that by myself, right, as an undergraduate. But they weren't able to book me any other gigs.
God, so like we tried, we went for a year.
Yeah.
You didn't get anything.
Exactly.
You got to move on.
That's exactly what it was like. Yeah,
harsh.
And
Hollywood, baby.
Yeah, and when that happened, like I was probably I had the worst career depression I've ever had in my life. Like during
this was your low point.
That was my low point.
Dull point. And you were how old at this
point? In like the true Hollywood story.
28, 29?
I was like 28, 29, probably around 30 at the time. Yeah. Not knowing what I was going to do. Really sort of thinking hard about whether or not I should go back to school and like go the medical school route.
So you were signed with CA. They drop you.
Yeah.
The Current TV is done. You're thinking, maybe I go back to school and I move out of like LA's
Dude, I was
done.
like,
the LA dream's over.
Yes, 100%.
And you've been doing it though at this point 6 years.
Yeah. Like LA was my home. I knew I spoke the language of LA. I loved this city. But I wasn't an actor.
Right.
Right. I wasn't like really making it as a musician, nor was it my intent to do so. And as a host, like, by the way, that job of being a host is something that existed in, maybe 2005, 2006, but doesn't exist anymore.
It's very small. And now to be a host, you basically got to have tons of hosting credits or famous. Ryan Seacrest is like one of 4 hosts.
Mario Lopez, Ryan Seacrest. You can name the other, Nick Cannon.
Yeah.
The people who are getting hired to host shows are usually the shows are built around those people, and those people are experts in whatever it is that the show is about.
Right.
Right. So like, if there's going to be a health show, usually it's like somebody who has a name in the world of health.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Drew.
Or if it's a cooking show, it's a chef or whatever. It's like, it became. I remember the language that my agent used at the time, like when she dropped me. She was such a cunt, but she said,
wonder what she's up to now. She's still there.
Oh God. She said she signed me as a host, but then, over the course of that year, she's like, sorry, Max, it's an expert driven market now. You got to have like an expertise. And I was like, well, I'm interested in health, and at that point, she laughed at me pretty much because I'm not, you have
no formal background in health. You're
right.
like, I have an undergraduate degree in health, and
right.
she's like, haha.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cute, Max.
Yeah, and so imagine all that's happening, right? Where, like, I'm having like crazy existential thoughts, super depressed, like, just really negative self-talk, and that's not something that I'm even prone to, but. At the time, I was like very down on myself, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then, in tandem with that, my mom.
What year is this? So this is like 2000.
This is like 2012, 2011. 2011, 2012. Yeah, around that period. Probably 2010 to 2012, somewhere in there. And so it was like that exact moment where things were going so wrong, in my professional life, that in my personal life, things were, there was like, you were like, what else could possibly go wrong at this point? And that's when my mom got really sick. And my mom is somebody who I was always the closest with. I'm the firstborn in my son, it's very, very small Jewish family, like, Jewish boys very close to their mothers, it's like the stereotype.
Most families, not
Most
me.
families, no, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I was kind of a mama's boy. Like, my mom was very protective and, very, very small family. And she just loved me and my brothers so much. And yeah, it was about 2011 when she was diagnosed for the first time with a neurodegenerative condition. She started to complain to me about brain fog and all this stuff that I had no framework of understanding. Nobody in my family tree had ever had any kind of dementia or anything like that. But ultimately, I realized that I had to kind of step in and see for myself, figure out what was going on. And I started going to doctor's appointments with her, and I ultimately, because her symptoms were so atypical, we ended up at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, and she was diagnosed there with a condition that's sort of like having Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease at the same time.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was a pretty difficult time for me.
So my parents luckily are both still healthy. But I imagine when you're going through this kind of career depression separately, then your mom gets really sick. Was it almost, did it take away where you're like, okay, who cares about my career stuff? Did it almost help with that because you're like, I'm worrying about my mom right now? Or was it just double down? My life is going down the shitter.
Just going down the shitter?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. It did relieve some of the anxiety that I had about my career because it really kind of put things into perspective for me, you know?
Yeah, you're like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Family first.
Yeah. So it was, I guess, helpful in that sense. And it made my priorities very clear. I packed up my LA life, which was very hard to do. I was, you know, I mean, I had like an on and off relationship here in LA, but with a girl that I loved. And I basically said, you know, I had to like say goodbye to that situation. You know, the dream that I had of, you know, carrying forth the torch and like being on TV again and, you know, like it almost felt like I had wasted 6 years of my life at that point because I wasn't able to transition that into anything else.
Right, and it paid, but you weren't rich off of it.
I paid and I wasn't rich and I wasn't famous.
Yeah.
Not that I want to be famous, but it's like I had nothing to fall back on.
So I've only known you since you've had like a social media following on this podcast.
Yeah.
At this time, social media obviously wasn't as big as it is now, but you had been on TV for 6 years. Social media was out. Just out of curiosity, how many followers did you have on Instagram or something?
Very few.
During this.
Very few, yeah.
2012
time. My Instagram account was probably, you know, I probably had like 3,000, two or 3,000. So like.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Followers. Just like I was just like a normal guy on Instagram. My Twitter account, I had maybe like 10,000.
Got it.
And it was verified on Twitter, which that would ultimately come in handy, you know, later on in the story. But yeah, so I kind of had this quasi public figure status. Like I had credibility from my time as a journalist, but I just didn't have a job, and I didn't have I didn't know where to go from there, you know? Like,
right.
I didn't want to write articles for the Daily Beast, you know? I didn't want to be that kind of journalist. I didn't care about politics, as I said, you know, any of that stuff. So there was really...
you were in a weird place.
I was in a weird place, yeah. I think I had like a blog. Somebody gave me blogger credentials on Psychology Today, which I thought was really cool. It was like, oh, cool, I can like write about science and stuff like that. And then I started curating things that I found interesting on social media. And because my mom got sick, I basically dedicated myself. So I packed up my stuff in LA and I moved back to New York to live with my mom. And I was about 30 at the time. And I ceased to be interested in appeasing my agents. I didn't know what I was going to do professionally. I just wanted to help my mom and to see what it was I could learn about her condition to potentially help her from the standpoint of nutrition and lifestyle, because those are things that I'd always been passionate about. And
so you're like, let me look into some just natural remedies that could possibly help with this brain fog, dementia thing that my mom has.
Yes, but because I had a background in journalism and because I had a lifelong sort of passion for fitness and nutrition, I knew where to look. Like I knew not to be swayed by the pseudoscience and the crazy claims that you find on social media when you're scared and you're Googling a condition that you'd never heard of. You know, I had sort of a scientist's perspective on things. I was very analytical. I was very skeptical. I knew what questions to ask. I knew, you know, I came from a place of knowing how little I knew, you know.
Right. You knew how to investigate something without getting suckered into some Facebook ad.
Yeah.
I was like,
exactly.
Buy this dick pill.
Yeah. Exactly. And so that literally like became my life's mission, you know, at that point, was to figure out what could be done to help my mom and what could be done to potentially prevent it from happening to myself. Because one thing that I learned that was pretty shocking, but thankfully I learned it discovered it very early on, is that when looking at the most common forms of dementia, changes begin in the brain decades before the first symptom.
Wow.
20, 30 years, by some metrics,
I'm scared.
even 40. Yeah, and if you take 30 years away from my mom's age at the time, my mom was 58, you get 28. So I was like, oh shit, this is actually something that like I need to think about in myself. Like I value my own cognitive ability. I'm like a very creative person. I'm very passionate. I'm very curious. Like, if there's any steps that I could be taking today that are going to help me, increase my odds that I'm not going to have to deal with what it is that my mom has, then I'm going to do that. I'm going to take those steps. So I just started like reading, but like relentlessly, like day and night, obsessing, like I do with things that I'm interested in, right? Because suddenly I have like a dog in the fight. So it went from like being passionate about fitness and nutrition, from one day to the next, I'm like fixated on brain health.
And then all of a sudden you're an expert on brain health.
Yeah, I mean, I don't call myself an expert,
sure.
but I, it's been at this point about 10 years of like just religiously like, researching and reading and consuming and questioning and asking and, I've become close friends and colleagues with some of the premier researchers in this space, which is a niche space, but this whole like sort of, dementia prevention.
It's niche, but it's growing. I mean,
there's
health food stores, there's podcasts, there's shows. It's pretty big. It's not that niche.
Yeah. And at some point I got, so basically to like close the circle, I got invited. I started putting out content on social media. I started to see right away that I was filling a need for people, that people were not really getting this information in one sort of place. And I also realized that I had an aptitude for it, for sort of, reading and assimilating and then spitting back out the science that I was researching in a way that was, that had like a tinge of optimism that was exciting and made the science compelling, but wasn't like over the top, borderline irresponsible with the messaging. Like being responsible with the messaging and accurate was always something that I was very passionate about because I always kind of knew that at the other end, like on the other screen, receiving what it was that I was putting out could be somebody like my mom who could be sick, and could be, who I could be like misleading. And I didn't want to ever do that with anybody,
Right. You're not making grandiose promises. Hey, follow me and you're going to have a six-pack and you're not going to get cancer ever.
Definitely not. No. Yeah. Like my experience with my mom honed me in a very particular way. And ultimately, I got an email. The Dr. Oz show reached out to me and they wanted me to come on and talk about my work. And I did. And I was pretty nervous, but I knew in my back pocket I had all those years of being on TV and that like, it had been like 10 years since I had been in front of a camera, but I just knew that like, that I had done the homework at that point.
But there was 10 years since that.
Since like current, Since
current, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a big gap.
Yeah. So there was like a big gap.
But what were you doing to keep yourself afloat during all this time then, if there was 10 years?
Actually, it wasn't 10 years. It was...
Or even 5 years.
Yeah.
Even if it was 5 years, what were you doing
to keep myself afloat?
For money? Did you just have savings that you were kind of burning through?
I had some savings.
Did you have to get a day job?
Yeah. I had dramatically cut my costs. So I was living at home in my mom's house.
And where's that? In
New York.
In New York, okay.
I was illegally Airbnb-ing an apartment in LA, still in LA. So
I did that for a few years.
Yeah. So I was like making some passive income on that. I also, while I was at Current, I was able to put, from whenever I would make bonus cash, I would like invest it like in the stock market. And so I was like selling some of those stocks and I was like living off of that and my savings. I'm good with money,
Yeah.
It's like, it's in my family kind of.
But during this time I
wasn't making any money.
And you didn't get a job, so you were just kind of getting by.
Yeah, I'm broke the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was making, when I started doing like the Dr. Oz show, I got AFTRA, I think SAG-AFTRA, like you get like a fee for that. So
did they have you come back after that first time?
Yeah, so I killed it, and they had me back so many times that I'm like, I've been on it like more times than anybody other than Dr. Oz at this point.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, at least when I was doing it, when I was living in New York and I was doing it, it felt like every week I was doing it because that was the topic of dementia prevention is a big topic for his audience. And it felt like it was very timely at the time. Like it had just sort of come out that there's all this research that, suggesting like what we meant.
That you happen to have read all that research.
That I happen to be, I'm like literally a walking meta-analysis for this topic, and I live across town, and so they would just they would send like the Uber over and pick me up, and it felt
Uber
like
Black or just regular Uber.
It was an Uber Black.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it just felt like for a period I was on it every week, talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And that led to a book deal. Very small book deal.
Well, it's still exciting.
Still exciting. But I knew that it was, that Hamilton song, I'm not going to waste my shot or whatever the lyric is. I knew that it was my shot, that was my shot.
The book deal.
The book deal. Yeah.
And how many books do you have now? Or is still the one? Or do you have more, right?
I've written 2 and I've got number 3.
3 on the way. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about this. So when you get a book deal, if that book flops, you're not getting another book deal anytime soon.
Right.
Unless you're get really famous or something.
Yeah.
Which you have gotten more credibility and more fame since that first book, I imagine. But that first book deal, I'm sure you took it really seriously, and you're like, I want this book to succeed. And did it succeed, that first one?
Yeah, so I took it very seriously.
You put out a great book, but what about what was the book on?
So the book was called Genius Foods, and it was basically everything that I had learned up until that point, like everything. It was a thick book, and I was like, I'm not going to get a second chance to write another book, so I'm just going to put everything that I've learned. And it wasn't really I wasn't thinking long term about establishing my myself and making a lot of money or having a big career.
You just want to put out a great book.
I just want to put out a great book. Yeah. A lot of people, when you look at books today, if you peruse the the diet and health section of the local bookstore, a lot of those books are kind of marketing plays to sell courses, supplements, and things like that. I mean, that's just the reality of this. That wasn't the case for me in my book. I didn't have a business.
Real, informative.
Yeah. I was dedicated to learning as much as I possibly could. Talking to the experts, reading the research, understanding the research, digesting it, putting it out into a way that was compelling. And
so was this book, did it touch a lot about dementia and that sort of thing, or just general health of everything?
I mean, it's very broad, but it also is the best sort of nutritional care manual that there is for the human brain. So it's the ultimate guide to dementia prevention, but it also is sort of an homage to this new topic where there's a strong, I should say there's a growing body of evidence that is sort of being called nutritional psychiatry, which looks at how food affects mood and our ability to focus and pay attention. So for people with ADD, ADHD, I mean, I think many of us in the entrepreneur space.
I almost don't believe in ADD, but I also don't know what the fuck I'm talking about at all. But ever since I was a kid, I never got good grades like you. And my parents, my mom's a lawyer, dad's a doctor. They've been like, he should be smart like us. Why isn't he getting good grades? So I think they kind of push. If you go to a doctor and you say, hey, I think my kid has ADD, the doctor will be like, yeah, your kid has ADD. I feel like.
Yeah.
I just think it's so overdiagnosed. So
it is.
So yeah, I've been told I have ADD, and maybe I do, but I also feel like ADD is kind of bullshit. Maybe it's just I like paying attention to what I pay attention to.
Yeah, I see. So, and I talk about this in Genius Foods. The ADD brain, somebody with ADD today would have been the ultimate hunter-gatherer. And the ADD brain today is somebody, we suffer under the constraints of specialization because we've, the post-industrial world, we went from being hunter-gatherers to being settlers where, one of our ancestors would have had to have been self-sufficient. They would have to know how to hunt food, prepare food, clean the food, prepare the food. They had to do
everything.
It all, everything. But then once we became settlers and started domesticating crops, then you had somebody to go out and hunt for meat. You had somebody to grow the wheat. You had somebody to pick the wheat, somebody to prepare it. So that sort of was the first time in human history where specialization became prized over self-sufficiency. And I think that an ADHD brain today is medicalized, right? But actually, in reality, you would have been the ultimate survivor. You would have been the ultimate, one-man band human hunter-gatherer that would have been prized for those characteristics. And today, it's like you just don't fit into the one-size-fits-all, education paradigm. And so we prescribe medication to treat that, problem in air quotes. But actually, if you look at people who are entrepreneurs, they're overwhelmingly people who have ADD, and they end up being insanely successful. Like, you don't think Elon Musk has ADD?
He has to. He started so many projects.
I know, exactly. And so do I, And so those are I think people with ADD, ADHD, I think that they're probably best suited for entrepreneurship, and suffer under the constraints of like the 9-to-5 desk job.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. So when this book came out, this book on brain health, I guess would sum it up in 2 words. Did you do anything additionally besides what the publisher did to promote it and make it a success? Because I'm sure there's tons of great books out there that no one buys, but people did buy this book. So did you think to yourself, I got to make this thing sell so I get another book or so that I can make some money? What did you do to promote it once it came out?
Yeah.
Obviously, you probably promoted it on Dr. Oz because you were on there all the time.
Yeah, I promoted it on Dr. Oz. I promoted the hell out of it on my growing social media account. I didn't have a podcast at the time, and I didn't have a huge social media following. Just so anybody, if anybody's wondering, like, do you need to have a ton of followers to get a book deal? I did not have a ton of followers. I was on the Dr. Oz show at that point pretty regularly, but there's no guarantee that that I was going to go on and be able to promote my book on the Dr. Oz show. You don't have those kinds of guarantees.
Right, Dr. Oz, you weren't actually, you didn't have a job for Dr. Oz. It was just when they called you, you would do it.
Yeah. I didn't have a huge social media account, and I've always been a good networker, so I always had a pretty good network. Networking is important.
Yeah, especially in entertainment.
Yeah. One thing that I did was when I say that I got like a small book deal, when you get a book deal, typically you get what's called an advance. And those numbers range, but for a first-time author, you get a pretty small advance.
Yeah.
Although for me, not really making any money at the time, it was an amazing sum of money, and I was so happy to have gotten it after all this time. Like, somebody's going to pay me to like write this book. But as grateful as I was to actually have that money in my bank account, I knew again that this was my shot, and that the world really needed to like read this book. That the world needed this book, and that it would be a shame if like nobody read it, because I had worked so hard on it, and I thought that it was so good, and that there was like nothing else like it.
Yeah, you had a real passion for it. It wasn't
real
just,
passion.
Hey, there's a book I did for a check.
Didn't do it for the check.
Worked hard on it. Yeah.
Worked really hard on it, and I knew deep down, and I still believe this, that it can change people's lives in a profound way. And it's not fluff. It's not bullshit. It's like it's like real legit science, and it's also a good read. It's entertaining. So I took approximately half of that advance, and I invested it in PR.
Right. When really that should be the publishing company.
Yeah.
But you're like, I'm going to make sure.
I'm just going to I'm going to kick myself if I don't do that.
So what did you hired a publicist, or what when you say you put it in PR, what was the thing? You started your own Google ads?
No, I hired a PR company that had worked with other books. And they did a respectable job. PR is not magic. There are no guarantees, and they're working with a bunch of different clients at the same time. But, I think...
But you were happy with what they did.
I was happy with what they did, and I also made it very easy for them by packaging the story, because stories sell, facts tell, stories sell, so you always want to make sure that you have, like, your story down. And it was a collaboration, ultimately. I have a lot of PR contacts, especially having worked here for 6 years. I had a lot of, like, contacts that were gathering dust, but back then when I knew that I had a book coming out, I reached out to anybody who I knew still might have had pull.
Might be able to help you. And you're like, hey, here's what I'm doing. If you could help, cool.
Yeah. And I took a big risk on PR because, again, there are no guarantees. And I was broke at the time. I really, like loved having that money, but I was and I didn't know that the book was going to be a success. So, but despite that, I was like, I'm going to take half of what I just got.
Got to go for it.
Got to go for it. Yeah. And PR is expensive. So
yeah, thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Huge risk. Huge risk.
No, it's a cool story.
There were no guarantees. And, also like, I'm not a medical doctor. So is anybody going to care what a guy like me,
I'm just,
has
I'm
to
super
say
into
about
health.
this? Yeah.
So I have pretty good genes. My parents we're a skinny family. I played a lot of sports growing up. Now I basically just hike a little bit, do push-ups here and there. Probably have high cholesterol. I've never been tested for it, but my brother does and my dad does. I eat a lot of junk food. I know that I'm always tired. I'm not doing it right. Your advice from social media, maybe you can give me more specific advice. But on your social media, from my perspective, it's not you're not saying crazy things that you're saying things that most people kind of know deep down, like, hey, eat clean foods, eat healthy foods, don't eat fried shit, don't eat too much dairy, eat healthy is essentially the main gist of some of your Instagram posts that I get. So what would be your advice for someone like me to
Well,
be healthier?
I'm a big fan of whole foods, not the supermarket, but just the concept of minimally processed foods. So when you say you eat a lot of junk food is basically...
I eat fast food, pizza, I eat, you name it. If it's bad for candy, ice cream, if it's bad for you, I love it. Yeah,
so ultra-processed food that typically brings together under one roof fat, salt, sugar, wheat.
Oh, my favorite.
It's delectable, yeah. It's what food scientists refer to as hyper-palatable. It's like food that's very difficult to moderate your consumption of.
It's a drug.
It's totally a drug. Yeah, it's totally a drug.
Cravings for it.
It's addictive.
Yeah.
It's, in fact, they did a study in 2018 where they found that when people were given only access to these kinds of foods, that they tend to eat themselves into a calorie surplus to the same degree of satiety as they would if they were eating minimally processed foods, where they would actually end up at a calorie deficit. So what that basically means is that by the time you're satisfied when eating these ultra processed foods, you've already eaten too much.
Right.
And we all want to eat until we're satisfied.
Right.
Right. Like,
yeah. If when I'm eating something, I know, hey, if I just stopped eating right now and waited 30 minutes for the food to digest a little bit, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But in that moment, you're like, but man, if I could finish this.
Well, I think
I
think it's it's good. It's okay to eat sometimes. Like, there's nothing, no one meal is going to affect your health in any way, positive or negative. It's about the dietary pattern as a whole.
Right.
So if you're saying that you eat tons of junk food,
probably about 50% junk.
50%, yeah. So I would say that you probably want to cut that down a little bit and maybe try to abide by like an 80-20 split or even 90-10.
Yeah.
On ultra processed foods, junk foods, they tend to have a lot of really unhealthy oils in them, like soybean oil, canola oil, corn oil, fats like that, very highly refined and prone to oxidation and other forms of chemical damage. And the brain is made up of fat by and large. So if you're eating rancid, damaged fats, that is going to basically damage the structure of the brain. I mean, not in a way that is, imminently like observable and noticeable.
But over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sugar, is not a good thing. It's just, taken up.
If it's not good, why does it taste so good, though?
Well, because
how do you defend that argument?
Because some of the best things in life, just it's like if the best things in life, always felt good, then life would probably be it would probably look a lot different. But sometimes, the things that we think that we love aren't necessarily the best for us,
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I like that on your social media. I mean, it's really, to someone who doesn't know about anything, it's kind of harmless posts that just are logical and make sense. But there's you're kind of controversial in the health world. Like, you love meat. And you're not saying, hey, we should all eat only meat. But you're saying, hey, meat's good. And if you're a vegan, that's fine. But it's not the healthiest diet you could have. The healthiest diet includes some meat.
Yeah.
Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's funny.
And people go crazy.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you noticed that I'm not saying eat all meat all the time. But it's just
no, you're not like, I love meat. I'm not.
Yeah.
If you're a vegan pussy, get out of here. You're just saying, hey, do what you want, but if you want the healthiest diet you should incorporate some meat.
Well, because there's this concept of like zealotry in nutrition, and vegan zealotry is among the most sort of pervasive. You know, where
what does that mean, zealotry?
It means sort of like you have this diet that you very deeply identify with.
Oh yeah, so it's my way or the highway.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
they're
right.
proud of it.
And
yeah.
they want to like evangelize it and convert other people because it's a part of their identity. You know, they want
Right.
to convert them to that cult essentially. And people become vegan for different reasons, you know, and there are certain reasons that I don't touch because, you know, for example, like people who are ethical vegans, I'm not twisting anybody's arm to eat anything. Like you eat the way that you want.
Yeah, you're just saying, from the research I've done, this is the healthiest. Like for me, I identify as a vegetarian because I would never want to harm an animal. That being said, I do eat meat.
Yeah.
But to my core, I tell people.
So you're a vegetarian who eats meat?
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian who eats meat.
Got
I
it.
identify as a vegetarian. I don't know if that's the right word for it or if that makes sense.
You can identify as anything.
But yeah, these days I see people identifying as a lot of things. So I identify as a vegetarian.
I appreciate that.
But I love cheeseburgers and fried chicken sandwiches.
Yeah,
So
where I sort of step in is when they make health claims, which they love to do. You know, that meat is unhealthy, that, you know, the fat in meat clogs your arteries, that, you know, eggs are unhealthy and things like that. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because my mom was essentially a vegetarian. And I'll never know if meat, you know, and I've never claimed that her abstention from meat was the cause of her health problems. But I do think that if she were to have had a more balanced diet that was inclusive of meat, that she would have, you know, it's my hypothesis that I will never be able to test, you know.
Right.
But I do believe that, you know, if she had had a more sort of balanced diet where she ate more protein and less processed, you know, carbs, you know, wheat-based carbs that she thought were good for her because they have, you know, they tend to have like the red Heart Healthy logo on products made with them. That she would have been.
See, I consider my mom to be a little bit of I'd call her batshit crazy, and she's a vegetarian. Again, can't prove anything, but would meat maybe stabilize her a little bit? You never know.
Well, there
could
is
only help with her. I'll say that. Can't get any worse.
There's a center in Australia called the Food and Mood Center at Deakin University, and what they're finding is that women in particular who avoid meat have, I believe, a twofold increased risk for major mood disorders. I think specifically depression. But there is actually a correlation between people who are vegan and mental health problems, and it could be because, you know, people who are very neurotic and tend to be perfectionists about their diet tend to gravitate towards a diet like that, like a very strict diet. So it's not necessarily, we don't yet know if it's the veganism that is,
or if that's just it pulls those people into that world.
Yeah, although we do know that, you know, like the vegan diet is a diet that is devoid of vitamin B12, which is not an insignificant piece of information. You know, that's a very important nutrient for the brain. And of course you can supplement with that, but I just think that that's like something that is not, you know, people like to like sweep that under the rug, you know, oh, you can supplement with it, which is a very privileged thing to say. Like, thank God we have supplements, right?
Right.
But
you shouldn't have a diet where
it's creating deficiencies.
You are dependent upon supplements.
100%.
Now you told me maybe 80-20, 90-10. Are you on 90-10, 95-5? What's your health to unhealthy? How often do you treat yourself to a In-N-Out?
It varies. I would say that I'm about 80-20. I don't really eat In-N-Out, although last night I did have a Hi-Ho burger, which is grass-fed.
Oh, yeah. That's very good.
But even then I eat it with a lettuce wrap. So I always.
So when you do treat yourself, you don't go full. You never go off the rails. And you're like, tonight I'm having a large pizza and a scoop of ice and a pint of ice cream.
Yeah,
you never do that.
No, I never go completely off the rails. You know, maybe like once in a blue moon, like
your birthday.
Not even then. I mean, but like once every maybe like 2 years. You know, something like.
What do you think triggers it? Like a bad day? What?
No. Not a bad day.
Are you ever having a bad day and you're like, man, fuck it, I'm having a candy bar?
It's just, I mean, there's this There's this quote that I heard once, and it's so funny being like a health author and then quoting her, but Kate Moss once said, "Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels." I don't like that quote necessarily because skinny is not a goal.
But what she's saying is being healthy feels way better than a delicious ice cream
than a momentary bout of mouth pleasure. So I would actually I've paraphrased her and I say and I like to say that nothing tastes as good as healthy feels.
Right.
Like if I'm going to feel like shit afterwards,
not worth it.
Then it's not worth it to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems pretty reasonable.
Quoting Kate Moss here on the podcast.
Smart woman.
She
I don't know is she an actress? Who's Kate Moss?
She was a very famous model.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Hey, some models are smart. Most are probably big dum-dums that rely on their beauty. But I bet some of them are very smart. Maybe Kate Moss was one of them.
I don't know. Some are, I'm sure, very smart. Yeah. You never know. Everybody's different.
So you're 80-20, which isn't crazy.
Yeah.
That means 1 out of every 5 meals is gonna be delicious.
It's gonna be something that like
lettuce wrap burger.
That falls probably outside of what I publicly preach. But I don't claim to be perfect.
No.
But like,
I've heard you say 80 or 80-20 or 90-10 or whatever.
Yeah, like I'll just go to town on. I made some gluten-free like rice pasta the other night, and I bought this like pad thai sauce that has like a little bit of like canola oil in it. Like it's later on in the ingredient list. So ingredient lists are organized in a hierarchy of like most prevalent to least. And I'm pretty, I don't consume canola oil generally. I don't buy it for my house. I actively try to avoid it, but it was in this sauce that my brother bought, and it was in my house, and I love pad thai, so I tossed it, and I just went to town on it. It was really good. But
now, how do you manage overeating? Or is that hard for you? Like, how do you know if you make a big thing of food?
It's not
I'm eating this amount and then I'm done.
It's not a huge problem. Like, certainly you can overeat, right? Like,
sure.
Sometimes I'll overeat and I feel like shit.
Because I've seen fat vegans, for example.
Yeah, of course.
Or fat because they're like, I'm healthy, I'm a vegan, and then they just eat quadruple the amount they should.
I tend to, and this is one of the major dietary tips that I put forward in my latest book, The Genius Life. If you prioritize protein, it's very difficult to overeat. I mean, you'll feel as though you've eaten a lot. You'll feel full, but you actually haven't technically overeaten. And I think what people mean generally when they use the term overeat is they've consumed more calories than they expect to burn over the course of a day.
Right.
So you might feel kind of crummy afterwards, but if you're eating to satiety and it's largely going to be protein, you really have nothing to worry about. And that is how I eat. Generally, like I eat as much meat as I want, so that I feel full, and then I kind of fill in the gaps with,
healthy
vegetables or like that pasta or something like that. Yeah, but generally, like by the time I'm satiated and I'm full, like I feel good. I might even feel as though I've overeaten, but I haven't actually overeaten.
What about vitamins and stuff? Do you take any supplements or vitamins, or do you just try to incorporate it all within foods?
With food, I do take some supplements. I take like a good fish oil. I take magnesium. Magnesium is pretty hard to find. Or it's not hard to find. You can, a lot of foods have magnesium, but magnesium's like a super important, it's almost like an anti-aging mineral. I think we need, I haven't looked in a while, but you need about 300 to 400 milligrams of it every single day. And just getting that from food, is hard. And it's involved in hundreds of, biochemical processes in the body that range from energy creation to repairing DNA damage.
So are you pretty religious about that? Do you wake up, you have a routine, you wake up, you take your magnesium pill?
I generally will take it sometime midday when I have food in my stomach, because some vitamins
they make you feel a little weird if you don't have anything. Certain
vitamins, there are a handful of fat soluble vitamins, A, E, D, and K are fat soluble, so you want to take those if you're taking them. I take vitamin D and vitamin K with food. But then also certain non-vitamin compounds like carotenoids, I take a compound called astaxanthin, which is a pigment found in marine animals like wild salmon. It's what gives wild salmon its characteristic rich red color. Very good for your skin, for your eyes, for your brain. Those are also fat soluble. So generally, if I'm taking a handful of supplements, I'm going to do it with food in my stomach, so that I'm not peeing anything out, or leaving anything to chance.
And what are your thoughts on these supplement, like what's Joe Rogan's company called?
On It?
On It. Like, what are these type of companies? Are these kind of just these same things that they've wrapped in a company so they're good? Or are a lot of these companies putting out, there's tons on Amazon, like help brain activity and stuff like that. Would you say the average company that's making a product like that, even if it's from China a lot of the times, would you say they are good and they're kind of just taking a lot of these vitamins and things that are good and putting them into a product, or a lot of them just bogus, or both? Or
I mean, I think the claims sometimes can be bogus, but generally, like a company like On It, I would trust what they're putting in their products
to be good for you rather than
Yeah. I mean, On It I think is most known for like Alpha Brain, which is a nootropic supplement, which I'm not a big believer in those kinds of supplements. What I've always said is food is the best nootropic. If you're eating a shitty diet, your brain's not going to work the way that it ought to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd much rather optimize my diet and my lifestyle than try to put a Band-Aid over that with a supplement. But more sort of basic supplements like protein powders, I'm a huge fan of.
I was going to ask you, so like for me, when I want to be healthy, I'll take a protein shake with my breakfast so that I feel full and I don't eat more food. So I'll take like what's the big juice company? Naked protein shake.
Naked, like the bottled ones? Those are like loaded with sugar.
Yeah, so those are bad.
Yeah, I would avoid that.
That's like a dessert. So I should not take naked.
One of the best.
But they'll have like a vanilla naked protein shake will have like 30 grams of protein, it says on the cover.
Yeah, I would skip the naked because it probably has like 50 grams of sugar in it.
Yeah, it tastes like a milkshake.
Yeah. And I would just buy, it's very inexpensive these days, like a jug of protein, like whey protein, and just keep it in your house and use that.
But then it tastes like garbage.
No, they have like vanilla flavored, chocolate or vanilla flavored. I tend to go for vanilla, but they taste great.
So how many calories, if you saw a drink that had 400 calories, that's too much? Like what's a calorie number where you're like, okay, that's reasonable. You can have a protein shake with 100 calories. What's like an appropriate amount of calories where you'd be like,
I would say like
you're allowed to have that.
I would say like 200. Like
200.
If a beverage has like more than 200 calories, I probably wouldn't.
Got it. So 200 and under you'd be okay with.
But it depends. Like, are we talking 200 calories of protein? Then yeah, I'm game.
Okay,
but if
so
it's like 200 calories of like mostly sugar,
a green tea that was 200 calories, you'd say that's too many.
That's way too many, because if it's just green tea, I'm assuming that those calories are. But
they probably put something in to make it a little taste.
Yeah. Generally, you don't want to drink your calories. It's just not a smart strategy, because, anything that you drink, with the exception of a protein shake, is like you don't get any satiety benefit from drinking sugar, for example. But it cuts into your daily calorie budget, and there's no biological need for that.
Right.
And
so if it's non-protein, now you're saying got to be under 100 or under 50. What would be?
Well, if it's not protein, for me, I try not to drink any like calories.
So even 50, you'd be like, no, what's the point?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't drink that. I mean, that's like.
When was the last time you had a Mexican Coke?
Well, think about it this way. So 50. So we'll just say 40 because it's going to be easier to do the math. But sugar has 4 calories per gram. So if you have a 40-calorie drink, then that's going to be 10 grams of sugar in it. That's like, and if you really want to visualize it, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4 grams. So you're basically consuming 2.5 teaspoons of pure sugar. Like, just picture putting those teaspoons of sugar in your mouth. You don't, like, nobody needs that.
Right.
And now if you're a bodybuilder and
you're going to burn it all away.
You're going to burn that all away.
Yeah, like Michael, if you're Michael Phelps.
Right.
I heard that guy just ate whatever he wanted because he worked out 10 hours a day.
Yeah, because they're just like a furnace for like these calories, right? They're like
then
walking furnaces. Then it doesn't matter. But like for you or I, like, no, I mean, I'm largely sedentary. Like, I have to schedule my workouts.
What do you work out, an hour a day?
I try to work out. I don't work out every day, but I try to work out. Like, I try to have like a good hour workout session 3 to 4 days a week, and then like on days that I'm not working out, I just try to walk around as much as I can, which is hard to do in LA.
So yeah, pretty normal amount of exercise. Definitely not.
Yeah, not
crazy.
Extreme. Definitely not extreme.
There's some helpful stuff here.
I feel like
but when was the last time you had a Mexican Coke? That's what I want to know.
I don't think I've ever had a Mexican Coke.
Not once?
I haven't had a real soda in probably 15 years, maybe 20 years. Yeah.
I want to make a video of just forcing you to eat bad shit.
Just bad shit.
I feel like your followers would love it today because you're so healthy. Just be like, today I'm gonna drink this Mexican Coke and eat a pint of ice cream and see what happens.
I mean, look, if I was like that religious about it, I would be shredded, and I would look like I'm not. I'm like, I think I look like a normal guy. I just like, I think it's. I don't want to have to obsess too much. Right. I don't want to have to work out all the time.
Yeah, you're not crazy obsessive.
Yeah.
You're reasonable.
Reasonably obsessed.
Do you have anything in your life that you need help with that I could help you with?
Oh, man.
You're a health expert. You got a big following. You got a popular podcast.
I do need a
everyone's got problems, dude.
I feel like I could use a therapist. What do I want to solve? I feel like I would like to solve like some lingering like relationship stuff,
with past relationships.
Yeah, at least in my own head to reconcile.
Like you want to reach out to them and just be like, "Hey, are you saying you ghosted chicks? Like, what's the issue you have with these loose ends?"
I have ghosted in the past, and I'm not proud of it. And I want to kind of like figure out the part of me that is content to ghost somebody.
I think everyone who ghosts, it's the same reason. It's easier to ghost than it is to kind of hurt someone because rejecting someone, you have to face the fact, hey, I'm about to let this person down. So you're like, it's easier to just kind of ghost them. They don't have to like feel their pain.
I know.
So it's selfish in a sense, but I've ghosted. I've been ghosted. I've ghosted. It's shitty. I think when I turned 30, I made a rule that I wouldn't ghost any people anymore.
Wow.
But I still kind of do. I found like you find ways around it where I'm like, I don't ignore people anymore, and I'm not just going to leave them on red for 10 texts in a row, but still actually going to someone and say, hey, I really liked hanging out with you, but I think we should just be friends or whatever it is. It's a hard text to do.
It is a hard text. I dated a girl who I had been friends with for a long time, and we both kind of had like mutual
phone calls, even harder.
Yeah. That's the hardest. Yeah. There was a girl who I dated during quarantine for a couple months, and we were friends for a while, and we both kind of had mutual crushes on one another. But I thought that she'd put me in the friend zone. Over the years, she thought that I'd put her in the friend zone, so we just like never hooked up. But it was like one of those weird quarantine things where
it happened.
It just happened.
Quarantine love, yeah.
Quarantine love, and we knew, or at least I knew, pretty soon after we started dating that it wasn't like the fit for the long term. Mm-hmm. But we still like each, I think, got a lot out of the relationship, just in terms of like personal growth. She was a very smart, emotionally evolved woman.
And you got that curiosity out of the way. If you both had a crush on each other for a long time, okay, well now we know.
Yeah, it was great. But one of the best things about her is that when when it ended, she was the one. Even though we both felt that it was not appropriate for the long term, that we weren't the right fit, but she was the one who sent me this very long, beautiful, well thought out. You could tell that she had like written drafts of it, like that kind of text.
Yeah.
Gently like.
Do you think she's recycled that? Do you think she sent that same text with like takes your name out and put someone else's name in her life?
Maybe.
Or do you think it was made just for you?
Jesus, I think I have a feeling that would be really funny. I think it was made for me. And at least that's what I want to tell myself.
No, I think it was too.
And but yeah, I was like very impressed, and it was almost so good that I kind of wanted to copy it. And
you literally, you take it and you switch the names out and make it your own.
100%.
Yeah, that'd be pretty. That's a good idea. Even though you felt the same way and you wanted the relationship to end, did you feel slightly rejected? And you're like, well, why don't we give it another shot? Because you got rejected?
No, I felt relieved because I'm not man enough to, that's what I want to work on. I wouldn't have written that kind of message. I probably would have sent a message, but I remember feeling at the time this inclination to distance myself, which could be interpreted as sort of like a ghost.
Right. No, I feel the same way about myself.
That,
It's something, even though I don't technically ghost people anymore, I definitely need to be better about rejecting women because I'll convince myself in my head, well, maybe I'll reach out to her again in 2 weeks, but I know that I won't.
Yeah.
Or I'll say it, or I'll do it this way. I'll say, hey, I'm leaving town for a month and kind of end it that way,
Yeah.
So we're probably not going to be able to see each other for a while. I'm leaving, but it's not real. Or even if I am leaving, that's not. I need to just be like, hey, I really like you, but I don't think we're going to work out in the long run. So
That's the way to do it.
on.
That's the way to do it. I would have probably sent her a message, but she beat me to it, and it was just a really beautiful.
She's a man,
and she's the man.
She's
she actually recommended some really good books for me to read too. Like she definitely like
on this same subject.
On the subject of like male personal growth, relationship growth, like whatever. I don't know what the term is.
But she did it in a way where it's like, hey. Because to me, when you say that, she recommended books basically saying I need to work on myself and I'm a piece of shit.
She pretty much, yeah. She pretty much
did it in a nice way.
She was like, yeah. I mean, she said like, Max, you've got walls. Like you're hard to read sometimes. Like you should learn about being more vulnerable or something like that. And I'm like, in my head, I think I'm a vulnerable guy. Like I would describe myself as a vulnerable person. I put my life out there. I'm very sensitive. I know that I am very empathetic. I care about people, but that's not, I guess, what it means to be vulnerable as a man. And that's what I've like.
Was being vulnerable, watching The Notebook and crying? I
think it means like sending the text messages like you're talking about doing, like being okay with being rejected. And, like it's not vulnerable to ghost somebody. It's the opposite of being vulnerable. It's vulnerable to send the text message like you've been doing. And so that's all part of it. It's like learning what it means to be vulnerable as a man. And that's something that like, I don't know. I guess I didn't really have any like really positive male role models growing up. Like my role model was like my mom, but my mom and my dad didn't have a very good relationship. So, it's sort of like been a process of unraveling all this stuff. And also like, I, for a long time, had a very long-term, like on and off again girlfriend, and I was never able to make it work, even though I loved her very much. So
what would be your perfect 4 qualities in a woman requirement to be your girlfriend? Because I feel like you're a heartthrob. I don't know this about you, but I feel like half of your Instagram followers want to be your girlfriend. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like. It's always the ones that want you don't want, and the ones that you want don't want you, at least in my life. It's like always. I have, like, people are like, oh, come on, you do well with the girls. I'm like, yeah, there's girls that like me, but that does, but.
Yeah, can relate to that.
So what are 4 qualities? For me, it's
Why do you pick 4, by the way? Why 4?
Because for me, it's 4.
It's 4,
It's just my own selfishness.
All right, you go first.
Okay, so for me, to give you an example, they got to be hot. And some people would say, oh, you're a bad guy, like you shouldn't care about looks. Everyone cares about looks. Or 99% of people care about looks. It's not, that's just normal. Admit it to yourself or don't, but I care about looks.
Caring about looks, yeah.
So they're not just looks. They can't just be hot, but they got to be hot.
Yeah.
Smart, no dum-dums. If I'm around someone where I'm just like, roll my eyes whenever they say a sentence, can't be around that. Kind-hearted. If they're mean to people, if they're mean to waiters, if they're mean to the people in their life or don't care about them, I think that's a red flag of something that they'll be mean to you. And then sense of humor. Sense of humor. Yeah.
I mean, what else is there? You kind of described the perfect woman right there.
That's a perfect woman, yeah.
I mean...
But it's only 4 things. There are only 4 qualities.
Yeah.
But those are the ones I require.
I don't know.
Anyone you want to add to that?
I mean, I would say like...
You could say same here, but...
No, I mean, hot is definitely important. Well... I would say like values health, like if she doesn't like respect her body enough to like, because some girls are just
even if she's hot, what if she eats pizza and smokes weed all day but she's hot and smart?
I don't care. Funny. Like you can't just like look hot. You gotta like, I gotta know that like internally,
So if I was a chick, you could not date me.
I would, I'm not,
what if she was willing, she was like, listen, I'll be honest with you. I eat fast food every day, but I agree it's something I should work on and like,
yeah,
I'll work on it with you.
Well, I love when girls have a healthy relationship with food, like meaning that they feel no guilt about their indulgences, and that they love like a good steak or like, like I don't like girls who are rigid about their dietary choices. And I've dated, I think, a girl that definitely had like an eating, disorder in the past. And, yeah. And so I really like when a girl has a healthy relationship with food. But I want them to, I do believe that like, eating well is a form of self-respect in a way. And if a girl's putting like just cheeseburgers and fries and soda into their body, to me that says something that there's a problem there. And I could be wrong, but for me, like, the same way that when I'm like the food quality, like I feel very proud. I feel a sense of pride bringing the best quality food that I can afford into my house. That whenever I have, a date over or my family over or friends over, that I'm giving them the best quality food that I can afford. Like I feel an incredible sense of pride about that. It's a gift from me to the people that I care about in my life. And I kind of feel like that, like that's how I treat myself. That's how I treat others. It's a reflection of how I feel about myself, how I treat you. Right. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like
you're a very hospitable man.
Yeah. Well, I want to see the same level of like the same type of respect, in like a girl that I'm with to herself. And so, yeah, I mean, that's not to say that they can indulge or anything like that, or that they're obsessed or, it's not, but just like
So basically you take my list and you would add healthy lifestyle to it.
Also probably like patience, I think, is a virtue. I'm not like, I don't do well around people who are like anxious. So, being whatever the opposite of just being chill. I think
chill. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good virtue.
Chill's important. If they're stressed out all the time.
Yeah.
That stress could leak onto you.
Yeah. Have some passions. I think that's important. Like if a girl is just content to sit on the couch all day watching, binge watching old Netflix shows, I'm not going to find that.
So you're not just Netflix and chill kind of guy. You like to go out and do stuff too. You want to go out on dates, travel, little adventures.
Not like over the
sometimes
top. I love to chill too, but
but not all the time.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not a success thing. Like
you want to go to the zoo sometimes.
I just want to go to the zoo sometimes. Yeah.
No, but she's got to have not a success thing, but she's got to have goals.
Something, just something that she's like, like it could be fashion. It could be something I'm not at all passionate about, but just something other than like. I
agree with that. I used to like girls, or would say, I don't care if she works at Taco Bell. That's her deal. I don't care. But now I'm like, nah, it's hot. It's attractive if she has a passion and a goal. And if she has talent, even chicks who are, chicks, I don't know, is it demeaning to call girls chicks now? Women who have a talent is really attractive to me. Like if I see a girl and she's like has an amazing voice and sings or plays an instrument incredibly well, I find that to be really attractive too. Yeah. Just the fact that they took time to master that. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Talent, some kind of talent.
Okay, final question before we go. Thanks for doing the interview, by the way. You're a very good speaker. I know you have a podcast, but you have a very good mind to talk about yourself and to talk about the stories in your life. Like it's been really, I've learned a lot and I think it's really engaging. But you've been in the biz, so to speak, whether that be entertainment, hosting, healthy, whatever, health expert. I don't even, what do you call it? Health journalism.
Yeah.
What is the biggest failure story you have? So I know you had that lull of that gap in between the Young Turks, but has there ever been something where you're like, I think I'm about to do this thing and it just didn't work out, or maybe an audition or this opportunity that was almost there that you kind of think, man, what if that happened?
Oh, man. Biggest failure.
Is there any, do you ever lose sleep over something?
Man.
Maybe you don't have one.
No, I definitely have failures. Jesus.
Or not like, not even necessarily a failure, just kind of a missed opportunity where you think to yourself, oh, I screwed that up.
I got fired from Abercrombie once.
For what?
I mean, I worked for them for like a week, freshman year of college.
Oh, you got fired after 1 week?
Yeah, like it was like a week and a half or something like that.
Well, to give you an example, like I had a friend who came in here and he like went through the whole auditioning process at Saturday Night Live. Auditioned for Lorne Michaels, got as far as you could go, but didn't get the job. And in the moment, he's like, he was obviously devastated, even though it was a long shot to begin with. But he's very sad that he didn't get it. But in retrospect, he's happy he didn't get it because now he has his podcast and he's doing all these other things that is making him very happy. And
yeah, well, I mean, I guess going back to the book, not many people know this, but when I first had the idea to write a book, I was able to get a literary agent who believed in my story, and he thought that maybe I have a shot of getting a book deal. And we actually pitched it out to 4 different publishers. And the first 3 of the 4 meetings were the 3 meetings that I took where I felt like my brain was really like on that day. You know, like sometimes, you know, you're a communicator. Sometimes you get up on stage.
Yeah,
like,
you leave the meeting going, that went great.
That
and
went
you can leave
fucking great.
meetings
I
going,
killed it.
That was kind of weird.
Yeah, exactly. So the first 3 meetings that I took, I was like, you know, my words were flowing. I felt really confident, and, you know, I felt that I had like charmed the people that I was, you know, in the conference with. And all 3 of those publishers passed on my project. And then the 4th publisher that I had pitched it to, I felt like it was like, I remember the meeting was at the end of the day. I had just come out of like an editing session doing something unrelated. And I was just like kind of tired, and I was also a bit let down, you know, over the previous 3 meetings. And I just didn't think that I did like as well. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to be writing a book. And I think it was just like a few days later I got the email from my agent that they had offered me a deal.
The one that you, in your head, went the worst.
Yeah, the one that in my head went the worst, yeah. I mean, it didn't go bad. I didn't say something like...
It went whatever, though.
It just went whatever. I didn't think that
Yeah.
I thought that I had nailed the other ones and I was going to get like a book deal,
yeah,
you know, from the other ones. And I was like, you know, the 4th one, the 4th meeting, I definitely didn't think that I impressed anybody.
4th time's a charm.
4th time's a charm, yeah. I ended up getting the book
cool.
deal, and it ended up becoming a huge hit, you know, like my book. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Inspirational. Thank you for doing the podcast. Is there anything you would like to plug on here? Your own podcast?
My own podcast, yeah. I have a podcast called The Genius Life, and it's all about health and wellness and personal development, all that good stuff. And I've been very lucky to record some of the episodes at Melrose Podcasts. So
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, he was one of our very first clients right when he opened through our mutual friend. And I don't know what she's. Have you been in contact with her? What's she up to?
She's out and about. I don't know if she's still in LA. Taryn, yeah.
Yeah.
She's
I mean, there's no reason to be in LA right now for most people.
Taryn's wonderful, though.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to ask, Marco?
I was just going to say, to be manageable, because in the busy lifestyle, not now because we have COVID, but 5 foods that you have to eat every week.
5 foods that you have to eat every week. Yeah, I mean, that's easy. I would say, like, eat some eggs, eat some grass-fed beef, eat some wild salmon, dark chocolate. That's 5. Yeah.
Wait, what health benefits do
dark
chocolate give?
Well, first of all, it's delicious. Yeah. But dark chocolate's a great source of magnesium. We talked about magnesium a little bit. And a good source of copper, which not many people get too much of unless you're eating a lot of like mollusks or liver, which most people are not eating. Like, and copper's a pretty important antioxidant. And it's got these what are called like flavonols that have proven to be really beneficial to cardiovascular health, to brain health. People who habitually eat chocolate have better memory function.
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate,
or milk chocolate too.
No. You wanna go for dark chocolate. 72% or higher is the general
dark
metric.
chocolate, grass-fed beef, eggs,
some wild salmon.
Wild salmon. And what was the 5th one?
Copper. No,
copper's in the dark chocolate.
That's a mineral. Did we do a 5th? Maybe we didn't do a 5th.
Dark chocolate, wild salmon, grass-fed beef, eggs.
And then we got one more to go, right?
One more to go.
Let's say avocados.
Avocados are delicious.
The shit, yeah.
So what about, can you supplement grass-fed beef for like chicken and turkey, or no, not the same?
Yeah, you could. You just, there are different sort of benefits. Red meat in particular is very high, although you'll also find it in fish. But creatine, which is an important nutrient for brain energy metabolism.
This isn't creatine supplement.
It is. It's the same compound, but it's found naturally in red meat. And
okay.
Yeah, and certain fish. Red meat's a great source of vitamin E. It's a great source of omega-3 fats. It's a great source of iron and zinc and choline and all kinds of other beneficial vitamin B12. A myriad of beneficial brain-friendly nutrients. I mean, the research on red meat and brain health, it's not really the most evidence-based recommendation, because when you look, and this is sort of how science works, like when you look at the population as a whole, people who eat meat and eat more meat tend to have more unhealthy lifestyle behaviors, because meat has been so demonized over the past couple of decades. You find at the population level that people who eat meat, they eat a lot of fast food. They smoke. They're more inclined to smoke cigarettes, things like that. It's called the healthy user bias. So conversely, when you look, at if you were to like zoom out and look at all the vegans, right? Vegans are hyper conscious of what they're putting in their bodies, right? So in some ways, it stands to reason that you might see better health in vegans. But is it because of their diets, or is it in spite of their diets?
Right.
That's always the question. And the same thing with meat. There just isn't really good evidence on like people who eat paleo style diets with super high quality meat. So, from that sense, it's like, you just kind of have to assume that high quality meat, when you break it apart and you actually look at what it is and you take apart all the dogma, and the conditioning that we associate with meat, it's actually a very healthy food. It's an incredibly nutrient dense food. And
you saying this made me think of a question. Are there any health experts on the vegan side or another health side that are like your enemies or your biggest rival in the health world? Do you have anyone that despises you or that you despise that you'll publicly say, or no?
I don't think so. There are definitely people that disagree with me. I don't know if any of them despise me, but
they disagree with you but would still come on your podcast. Are there any that would be like, I'm not going on that guy's podcast?
Oh, I'm
Fuck
sure.
him.
No, I'm sure. Yeah. There's definitely some that like, the fact that I value some foods over others, some people would say that like, there are people.
Dark chocolate, that guy's a fucking idiot.
Or he's like, what a privileged thing to say about chocolate. There's a lot of people like that. Like, you never know. There's food has become politicized and things like that. Some people, and also nutrition is one of these sciences where there's sort of the room to have a lot of different, a myriad of different like opinions and voices. And
right,
so,
you could look up on the internet and find your evidence for any argument
you
want.
really can. Yeah, you really can. It's messed up. Some people take a more calorie centric approach. There are some people who eat only meat, carnivores, like Joe Rogan did, like January, carnivore January. He's eating only meat. So
that just doesn't even sound like, just logically, that doesn't sound healthy.
It's insane.
I'm sure there's benefits to it, but man, that just sounds, how could you argue that?
Yeah.
That you should only eat meat all the time.
I think people gravitate to me because I'm balanced and I provide sort of the best, most well thought out, reasoned sort of approach to nutrition. That's the only explanation that I can think of, that as to why I'm so successful, because I think nutrition, like politics, like anything today, has become so extreme where there's all these different factions.
You're right.
And even medicine itself, like doctors don't know anything about nutrition. Dietitians are, their schooling is paid for by junk food companies for the most part. And that's not to say all dietitians are bad, right? Definitely not the case. But like, but yeah, I'm just in it because I'm a human being who got to experience real illness, and my hope, my desire is that what I experienced isn't in vain. And for me, the way to sort of try to ensure that it isn't is to help others. Well,
I appreciate you coming on the podcast again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
It was great. Talk to you soon. See you guys next week. Bye.
You're listening to
Unlicensed Therapy with Ari Mannis.